thank you very much for the background and introduction. It was a good day yesterday, and I think that this should be an interesting first session this morning. Officially, I'd like to welcome everybody to this morning's session of day 2 of HIWAR. Without a doubt, the events industry whose primary purpose is to bring people together, to celebrate, to engage emotionally, for the purposes really of performing to, gathering information for, and selling products and services to as well, has been decimated, devastated, over the past 10 months. That's much commented on, much examined, and we don't need to analyse that in too much detail today. This notwithstanding, it's an industry that is quite hard to define. It embraces a diversity, a formal gatherings, across varied sectors, multiple stakeholders of different types. So estimating its true size is not an easy task. We have a broad mix, a strong mix of panelists this morning who represent a cross section of the sector, and that's a positive, a positive. A recent report by Allied Research estimated that the estimated industry value at 1,100 billion. That was in 2018. This was expected to rise to 2,300 billion by 2026, which gave an annual growth rate of approximately 10.3%. The World Travel and Tourism Council, to which a global events industry contributes significant data, reports that the travel and tourism industry supported 330 million jobs approximately worldwide and generated 10.3% of global GDP in 2019. However, change has come in a significant way via the pandemic. 9 months into that pandemic, the IMF's World Economic Outlook is projecting a 10.4% contraction in global economic growth. Percentages, mean a lot. However, in practical terms, across the MENA region, the United Nations World Tourism Organization is also projecting a 70% drop in tourism revenue for the region. That's the MENA region, in which 6 to 8% of GDP tourism accounts for. Those are sizable and significant numbers. Away from the region, you look at economies which account for 25-35% of their GDP is made up of tourism revenue. Then that takes it even further. They're generally small economies, very tourism reliant, but who don't necessarily have the government resource to be able to put together the substantive incentive and regeneration packages, recovery packages that larger economies will enjoy. So I spare a thought for them as well. Despite these trials over the past 10 months, there are seeds of hope. And I think that has been significantly boosted by recent vaccine news, which, recent developments, pending immunisation rollouts, has delivered a cautious optimism for 2021 and beyond. Only last month, The Economist published an article, it was an excellent article actually, which was entitled COVID-19 and the Business of Crowds. That article, evidenced market optimism via the modest share price decrease in some of the world's largest events businesses. And those modest share price decreases were despite their revenues virtually being wiped out for 2021. In essence, what they were predicting was that the sector would return to 75% of 2019 normality by 2022. And that's market trends, those larger organizations with strong cash balances and access to significant debt finance would prevail strongly during the period. At this stage, I think it's probably important to introduce our panel members who, as I mentioned before, they represent a broad cross-section of the industry. We're fortunate to have them here today. They're vastly experienced across the event sector. And we'll give an insight, a significant insight from an entrepreneurial perspective, from a governmental perspective, and from specific event management perspective, as well as sport and governing body perspective. I'd like to start with Ahmed Al-Abadi, who is the CEO of the Qatar Business and Events Corporation. Ahmed shared a presentation with us yesterday, and which gives a very good overview and insight into not just how the industry has coped in Qatar, but some of the regional impacts and ideas and processes and protocols for the future. Ahmed, can I hand over to you for a few minutes?
Good morning, and thank you, Abi. It's a pleasure to join you at Josoor HIWAR for 2020. All right. My name is Ahmed Al-Abadi. I'm the CEO of Qatar Business Events Corporation. It's the executive arm of the National Tourism Council. Our main focus on the strategy and the concern is to go attract international events, B2B and the B2C. We organize and manage events in the venue, and the venue is the Doha Exhibition and Convention Center, which is located in the West Bay area. This is I'm a member of the UFI Global Board of Directors for the 2020 and 2030. The Board of Directors tasked to implement and to attract international events, and it's a big platform for the international exhibition professionals. Also, I am the Deputy Chair of the Middle East chapter for ICA, which is the International Congress and Conference Association. During the last 6 months, we reviewed our plans, and we looked heavily into restructuring our mandate. Over the last couple of months, the period was very difficult, especially for the industry and for the business events industry. So NTC, or the National Tourism Council, we provide and we seek new products and new services that accommodate with the COVID restrictions. With the Ministry of Public Health, we had an aim, and the aim is to facilitate the safe resumption of the conferences and the international events. As well as all the events of the participants should be coordinated through the authority. The Ministry of Public Health issued a couple of measures to accommodate with overcoming the COVID-19 for the conferences and exhibition. We launched a Qatar Clean program. The Qatar Clean program, it's a collaboration with the National Tourism Council and the Ministry of Public Health to ensure that all the venues, they are strict, they are strict sanitization and cleaning measures. The measures of the Clean program, 99% or 90% of the hotels in Qatar has been already certified by it, and they can allow to operate. Very soon, the Qatar Clean program will be a must for all the retails and the rest of like the shopping malls. We are also working with the Ministry of Interior and in alignment as well with the Ministry of Public Health to work on a visa facilitation to ease the international travelers to come into the country. Events since September, we started our events, or we resumed our business events back in September. Back in September, where we had the first local bazaar and the local public event, while taking in consideration the 30% mandatory of the space. So if you have a 10,000 space of square meter, you're only allowed to use 30% as occupancy. And of course, having the mask and presenting ihtiraz. Ihtiraz, it's a local application that has been used and developed simply to have like a public distancing, between if you're entering a mall or entering any public area. We drafted, or Qatar Business Events Corporation, we drafted the first launch for the good practice guideline for the reopening of the business events at the Doha Exhibition and Conference Center. With the help of the Red Crescent, Qatar Red Crescent, they were providing, there were a number of volunteers under the supervision of the Red Crescent that helped while monitoring the public and keeping the social distancing. So I would special thanks really for them. Also the Ministry of Public Health, they are keeping a close monitoring to our events by ensuring the guidelines and all the implementations of the masks and the ihtiraz as well. And for the next events, we have a number of international events coming in September of next year and March of next year, that we are hoping that by the vaccine being available in Qatar in the next few months, as been announced by the Ministry of Public Health, there will be an ease of more to the international delegation to come in. And that's a short, just a short brief about us and who we are and what we can do. Thank you. Back to you, Avi.
Ahmed, thank you very much. That's a good overview and background as to what's happened over the past few months, and also protocols moving forward. I think this is our purpose today is to talk about the outlook for the industry, and I think that there are those green shoots of optimism that are there because of the pandemic will be tempered by protocols in the first place. I thought we'll come back to questions to each of the panelists as the discussion progresses today. At this point, though, I'd like to invite Julian Jammers to take the mic, as it were. Julian is the managing director of the Swiss Tech Convention Center, and a vastly experienced event professional and beyond. And Julian will be able to give us a brief overview of her role and the significance of the Swiss Tech Convention Center, to the business sector, not just there in Lausanne, but also, in collaboration with colleagues around the world. Julian?
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
You can hear me, I guess.
We can, clearly.
So, good morning from snowy Switzerland. We're preparing for our best ski season everywhere, but unfortunately, it'll just be a few Swiss people on the slopes. In any case, yes, as you said, Managing Director of the Swiss Tech Convention Center and Hotel. We are the only, I think, convention center that is actually located in the middle of a campus. And this is the world-renowned EPFL campus, one of the two Federal Institutes of Technology here in Switzerland. And our primary role is really to support the scientific community, or in particular. We have over 300 research labs here on the campus, and it's really a communication platform. We bring in the large international scientific congresses and conventions here, and of course the business community is very interested. You can see behind me our architectural wonder. It is a beautiful building that is well equipped to handle any kind of event. As you say, yes, 2020 has been a trying year, but we are extremely resilient people here. We have lost about 70% of our business. A lot of that, of course, is not just due to the event organizers canceling, but of course, government restrictions. I mean, that's really sort of the next key to what's going to happen. When the governments feel that it's appropriate for travel, or that they'll allow it, that's when we think that things will start to have a different perspective. Having said that, we have been prepared, similar to the Qatar Doha Convention Center. We have done all of the same things. We have our Switzerland Safe and Clean program, linked with the government's measures. So, while the industry is prepared, we are prepared, and I believe that my colleagues around the world are prepared to handle crowds in a safe and clean manner. We were very quick to adapt to those things. It really comes down to two things. One, obviously government restrictions, and two, rebuilding consumer confidence in travel and wanting to get out. Although I will say that I think people are slowly getting a little tired of the Zoom piece. We miss the whole serendipity moment that goes along with bringing people together, and that's very difficult to generate in a Zoom conference. My colleagues around the world, as I am on the board of the AIPC. The AIPC is the International Association of Convention Centers. So I'm in regular contact through Zoom, obviously, with my colleagues in Singapore, in Australia, in the United States, in South America. And we all see, the same things. It is the same story. While, one country may open up a little bit more because things seem to be under control, shortly thereafter, things, start to close down again. So while we remain optimistic for 2021, for most of us, we don't believe that things will really start to take shape again until probably the second semester. So we're talking, the end of summer of 2021, when we think that things will start to come back to life a bit, other than, local, regional, and some national events.
And as an employer, a direct employer, what has been the impact on jobs at the centre? So,
interesting question. And here's probably where we differ from many different places, Avi. Switzerland has a lot of support that they put in place for business, not excluding the events business. So for us, we work with something called partial unemployment. So basically, many of my staff who are not active right now, and those would be the people on the floor, basically, we are compensated to a certain extent for them to not, have a job, which of course relieves the issue of, having pure massive unemployment. Now, we're very lucky to have that kind of a policy. It's not the same thing everywhere. I have colleagues, in particular in South America, where centers have closed because the outlook is so dire. I have colleagues, even in Asia, where they've had to let go massive amounts of employees, because this is a very labor-intensive business. Obviously, it's not something that you can do from behind your computer, at least not in the format that we were used to. As we move to the hybrid digital versions, like what we're experiencing today, it's a different demand. It's a different type of skill set that you need, or competency, to be able to generate, events like this. So Switzerland is probably a little bit of a special case, I would say, in that sense. But clearly there are, massive employee cuts, particularly in the food and beverage business, which is very linked to what we do. You just simply can't serve food and beverage through a Zoom session. So that's where we see a lot of jobs being lost.
No, thanks for clarifying that. And I think that's replicated, across many parts of the world. I think the job support schemes, reference that in the introduction, is specific to many economies, especially, the more advanced economies. You, as a technologically and digitally advanced, center, you've also had to invest during this period of time. You've updated and upgraded your digital facilities. Can you talk just for a few minutes about that?
Sure. Indeed. Well, we've had the advantage of being, we're not very old. We're about 5 years old, the center. And when the center was put together, it was already in the optic. I'm sorry.
There is a mic on in the background somewhere. We can hear somebody
there
talking.
We go.
Yeah, that's good.
So yes, we've always been what I would say on the cusp of technology, besides the fact that we are located on this technological campus, so we do a lot of experimentation. Indeed, our investments have always been in the technology realm. So we were quite well prepared, I would say, to make this switch to digital, to hybrid. But there are centers around the world that are struggling with, is it the right investment? Is it a long-term investment? And how far do we go? Because you can only interact with your clients or with your participants to a certain level. With Zoom, we're limited to 90 faces or 40 faces on a screen. It's just not the same thing. As I said, the serendipity of meeting people in the hallway and running into someone and finding something in common to talk about, you just lose that. Nevertheless, there has been a significant investment in even studio-like schemes as we try to figure out, or as organizers try to figure out, how do you engage people in distance? So you have the likes of the Tonight shows, one-on-one kind of discussions with an audience that may or may not be real, Zoom screen or not, or maybe 30 people in a room, to try to create this kind of interactivity and this kind of excitement, which all requires technology to do that kind of thing. So it's investment in cameras and in laying lines, and the skill set behind that of people who know how to produce video series, for example. So that's what people are looking at now, with the big question, how long will this go on? Because I believe, and my colleagues believe, people are itching to get back together again.
Thank you, Julianne. I think what you summarized, Ahmed may, I won't speak for him, but the technological landscape and the infrastructural landscape of Doha is very similar to that in Lausanne. So you're blessed with strong digital investment in infrastructure to begin with. One of the great quotes that came out of the Economist article from last month came from a banker, really, JP Morgan, Marcus Debo, who said, "Trade fairs, the digital clunkiness of trade fairs protects the industry from disruption." In essence, that's part of the financial sector's confidence in the recovery of the market. He said, "You can't Amazon the events business," which I thought was a great quote, because it means that we are in the business of bringing people together. And that physicality of bringing people together, the serendipity, as you referred to there, Julianne, is something that we all hope to recover from. Ahmed, can I just ask you a question here? Are there any specific innovations, programs, incentives being developed to re-energize the sector when the skies reopen fully? I'd like to take the opportunity now to introduce Simone Masserani. Simone is the executive advisor to World Skate, which is the governing body, a global governing body, and he is also project lead for Tokyo 2020 or 2021 as it will be, and Paris 2024 Olympic Games. This is a different perspective on the global events industry, and actually the largest mega event in the world, arguably. You know, the World Cup, FIFA World Cup is there or thereabouts. Simone, you're from a governing body and a planning perspective. You know, are you able to give us an overview of your role at World Skate and how the pandemic has impacted governing body planning and preparations for next year's Tokyo Olympics?
Yeah, thank you, Abby. Good morning, everybody. And then thank you also, Michele and Josoor. It's a pleasure to be here again after last 2 years on the diploma, and that I can see on the participants, some of the students, and I had the pleasure to share a little bit of knowledge on the last couple of years. So thank you for this kind invitation. Yes, my role in as you mentioned, Abby, in World Skate is the project leader for to bring skateboarding into the Olympic Games, and then started 6 years ago when you probably remember the Agenda 2020 that the IOC released end of 2014, in which basically they gave the possibility to some of the local organizing committees, so Tokyo 2020, Paris 2024, and the others, to add extra sports in the Olympic program. And that was kind of the first time ever. And then I think that I was lucky enough to be part of these many first times, because for the first time they opened up the possibility to bring new sports. So we applied to this request coming from Tokyo, and we presented the skateboarding. And skateboarding, you know, some people say, okay, is it really a sport, skateboarding? Yeah, we can say that's sport. And then from that very moment, I followed up for all the process up to next year. We keep calling Tokyo 2020. We don't really want to change Tokyo 2021. It's going to be Tokyo 2020, even if. And then it's another first time, because for the first time ever, the IOC and the local organizing committee postponed the games. So another first time. And then for the first time, there is the possibility to see these urban sports, surfing and sports climbing and skateboarding inside an Olympic program that's been more or less the same forever, I would say. And then you probably heard last night that the IOC released the news about the 4 sports that will be in Paris 2024. So 4 new sports, 3 of them are the same. So skateboarding is going to be there as well. That's surfing and sports climbing. But they also added for the first time, the breakdance. And then again, same question as 4 years ago. Is breakdance a sport? Yes, it is. We can go into the details about what is a sport, if there is a competition, someone wins or loses, or is that a sport? Yes, it is. And by the way, you can see that the direction that the IOC is taking in order to bring back a little bit of young people and to give the possibility to the games to, readapt the time that it's changing. And then, so from the governing body perspective, that's the great opportunity, especially for the federations, the international federation that are a bit smaller and more agile, more flexible, and to bring in an added value to these mega events. They are, as said, Abby, so it's the biggest event in the world. Just for the sake of the numbers, so when we talk about the Summer Games, we're talking about more than 10,000 athletes participating all together for 2 weeks, plus Paralympics. We're just talking about the Olympics. In an environment that is very kind of complex to manage, and then the postponement of the games, there are different numbers that you calculated. But last week, Japan released this. They did a little bit of math. and they realized that the postponement of the games cost them 1.9 billion, kind of almost $2 billion just to postpone from 2020, same period 2021. And another report says even more than that. Someone said 2.9 million. Let's say a couple of billions, in which you say it's going to cost you just to move 14 days event plus 14 for the let's say a couple of weeks for the Olympic Games and a couple of weeks for Paralympic Games. Just to move them to postpone for a year, it costs a couple of billions. So as you can imagine, it's kind of complex. Blend of contingency. We are doing contingency plans over contingency plans, because as governing body working together with the local organizing committee, the only thing we can do now is do contingency plan. So if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that, because there is no visibility, as we all are saying that we have a hope, and that's great, we have hope, but at the same time, you can't really build plans on hope. You need to have kind of scenarios, and it's scenario number 1, 2, and 3, and 4. It's been kind of tough year, but very for the first time again. So to challenge ourselves to say, okay, how can we do the same thing in a slightly different way? We had to postpone all the qualifier events, are on hold now, so freeze them. And then hopefully we're going to be able to resume them in March, and so to give the possibility to the athletes to start the process, to train again, and then to get paid out of that, because for most of the sports, the athletes, they get money only if they compete. If they do not compete, no money. And more or less what Julien was saying about the people that are working in the exhibition. So. And then at this very moment, we had 1.5 million prize money on hold, because if we do not resume the game, the qualifier events, the athletes won't get this money. And so it's kind of, as we all are saying, so the impact was huge, and then we try to do our best to have planning, and then to be ready as soon as something's gonna happen. And then we will be free to travel again, and then we will be ready to put together all the contingency plans and say, okay, we're going to go that direction. We're ready to resume the games and the qualifier events and the games and stuff. So it's going to be an interesting year.
Simone, thank you. You mentioned prize money there for athletes. You mentioned funds being on hold. Are there any specific financial implications and/or impacts, possibly opportunities, for you as a governing body, in the event that the Olympic Games are scaled back or cancelled again?
Cancel, I mean, to be honest, yes, of course, there is one scenario as well, but we don't really look at that one. So we said, okay, something's going to happen. We're going to be able to deliver the games. Probably they're going to be different games. Just to give you another number. So if we say, the ticket. So one of the scenarios that is in place is, okay, let's do all the competitions without spectators. Fine. Contain the risk and so on and so forth. But just the revenues coming from the ticket is more or less $1 billion. So it's between 800 million and $1 billion. So we are saying that the local organizing committee is ready to renounce to 1 billion in order to deliver the games, because as you probably know, in all these big events, the revenues, the key revenues are coming from the broadcasters. So the IUC gets huge deals, and they already have deals in place with NBC. With all the different countries, they have the deals in place, and then of course the number of spectators on the broadcaster are much higher than the number of tickets you can sell in the game. So financial implications are huge. Think about just another kind of quick example. Olympic Village. The Olympic Village, it's 10,500 rooms, so beds for the athletes. But then of course Tokyo put together a scheme in which at the end of the Paralympics, these condos, they're going to go back to to the market. So someone already bought those houses to go and live in as soon as the games finishes. But that was supposed to go back to the new owners 1st January of 2021, not the 1st January of 2022. So there is a gap of 1 year in which I bought an apartment brand new in Tokyo, $15,000 per square meter, and then I have to wait 1 year to go into there, and then where we're going to live this year. So there are many financial implications on this process when talking about these huge events. Think about the hotel. So when you buy, as the local organizing committee, it's a bulk buy of hotel rooms, and then you said, okay, I'm gonna block your hotel for 2 months. Easier, not next one. So there is the need. So it's when you go into the details, that's the reason why it's so difficult with the calculation around the Olympic Games, because when you're into the details, you realize that which kind of criteria you take in consideration of the financial implications. They are huge, and then for all of us, including, I mean, for us, it's kind of small, because we are a small federation, and that, yes, of course, we have inflation where we're talking about probably a few millions compared to billions that someone else has to face. So, yeah, it's again, I think, as Juliana was mentioning before, so resilience is probably the only way to approach this first time ever postponement of the games, and then resilience and flexibility. And then the good news is that Paris is take advantage of what Tokyo is experiencing and try to make their events in 2024 to capitalize everything that Tokyo is doing in order to reduce the costs, in order to apply and to become the new norm or the new standard. So try to reduce that. It's probably on the long term, on the 4-year cycle, that's probably the best legacy that is going to stay financially.
Thank you, Simone. That's a good backdrop. I think some of the unintended implications, financial implications are there. Julianne talked about catering, and other parts of the ecosystem that support the events industry. They are the silent and unintended, victims in many ways. There will be recovery, but recovery possibly in a different way. At this stage, can I introduce Nick Cartwright? Nick is the managing director of Sabco Sports, based in Oman. It's Oman sports agency, a multifaceted sports company, and with a big footprint across the MENA region. And Nick, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks, Abby. Thanks to Josoor for the opportunity to talk to everybody, and a pleasure to meet everybody. As Abby said, we're a Middle Eastern sports agency, born and bred in Oman. So we're an Omani agency that has offices across the region. I guess we're sort of bring a different perspective to this conversation because we are Middle Eastern, operate in the Middle East, and that's our entire market. We operate within kind of participation rather than spectator. So we generate revenue from people taking part in sports rather than watching. And we're a much smaller operation than the Olympics next year. So we're a small business, so to speak. And as such, we've had to deal with the pandemic in a different way. We have government contacts, we work with government, and obviously we operate within government guidelines, but we have very little opportunity to sway government opinion. So we operate according to guidelines rather than help shape guidelines. Obviously the pandemic, and I mean our revenue, as Abby has indicated, is across different revenue streams, but for the purpose of this discussion, I mean, we'll focus on our events business, which is a significant part of our business, and quite obviously the pandemic has had a major impact on events. In terms of how it's impacted on us specifically, it's been devastating to the calendar. It hasn't necessarily been devastating to our business. for a few reasons. The Middle East, obviously, in the summer is relatively tough to put on events outdoor, participation events outdoor. So we were looking at the height of the pandemic was at our slower season, so we were fortunate in that regard. We've been able to be flexible. We've moved events. We've worked with our partners to still deliver events. An event that was due to take place in March and was cancelled with a day's notice off the back of COVID, we actually took place 2 weeks ago, and went really, really well. So we'd moved that event, and in the grand scheme of things, our company has probably benefited from the move. So we've had flexible events. We have useful and helpful partners. By establishing ourselves as an organisation that works well with its partners, delivers for its partners. Obviously, every business, every person that we deal with has been impacted by this pandemic in a different way, and their businesses have had to adapt. So we adapt with them. Obviously, we adapt for our own business, but we also adapt for our partners and for our participants as well. So we've reacted accordingly to that. I guess because of our size, we've been able to be flexible. We've thought on our feet. The obvious one is the online world. We've done some activity on the virtual world, and continue to go down that track. And just been able to think on our feet, move around. It hasn't been as devastating for us as it has been for some. That's not to say it hasn't been a very, very tough year.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the season where we need to be. We can operate outdoors. So we were very fortunate to be able to put our event on a few weeks ago, and now go to our partners and said, look, we've done an event here, it was successful, therefore we can do moving forward. We have offices across the region, and it's interesting to see how different countries operate in different ways. And in Oman, we've postponed all our events now until Q4 next year, just in line with the way that the Omani government is already dealing with how it's dealt with the pandemic to date, and how the vaccine rollout will be facilitated. And it's very different to other countries that we operate in, where like we've done an event last 2 weekends ago, and we're planning a very full calendar from Q1 for next year. The other point to note is that whilst this year has been financially poor compared to our targets, and significantly down on what we wanted to do, because obviously we've been able to do less work. We've reacted, we've been flexible, and we plan for next year. And looking ahead, the recovery from COVID does offer opportunities, both in terms of operating in the new normal, operating in a new way. Thinking callously, some companies have suffered more than we have, so there's opportunities to take on new properties that way. There's opportunities to see new ways of doing business. The virtual world again is an obvious one. We've picked up good business off the back of reacting well, so people see that we've done a good job in this period of time, and then they look to you to help with the recovery. And the one that we didn't think about was the event that we did 2 weeks ago. Was the feedback we got from the event was the best we've ever had. We've done this event a number of times, and this was the iteration that we got the best feedback ever. And we believe it was because of the ability to we don't use COVID, but the impact that COVID has on you and the way you operate your business is that it's far easier to control people's actions. So when people come to the event, normally they might turn up whenever they want and think they can do whatever they want, and it's very difficult for us to control that. Whereas now, the regulations are known, the procedures are easy to follow, and from every aspect, from internally, from our own delivery of the event, it was a far smoother event. It was actually, believe it or not, at less cost than we had planned for these events previously. And then from the feedback from all the partners, all the operators, the logistics team, and even from the participants who took part, it was the best feedback we'd ever had for an event. And all those things combined together, but we have to assume that's because of the reaction to COVID-19. So we take that forward when we're planning our season. Let's make sure we continue with that. There's an appetite for the public to get over this. Our numbers were higher for this event this year than they were the past year. and we assume that that trend will continue. In many countries in the Middle East now, there is an appetite corporately to move forward. Like I said, Oman is maybe not as aggressive as other countries, but corporate revenue, we're seeing good levels of interest from companies who want to help use sports industry to get back to normality, and the level of interest from people who want to take part in our events, mass participation, etc., has been I think, maybe not surprising, certainly a positive. You can't guess that it's going to be that way, but the talk was maybe there's a bounce back factor. You see around the world all these events selling out, and certainly at this point our sales are reasonable, given that we still haven't got certainty on the calendar for next year, etc. So it's been a very challenging year, one that we have handled has impacted on the business, and now we just need to rebounce and make 2021 glorious.
Nick, thanks very much for that overview. I think that there were a couple of things that you mentioned there. One was the issue of finance, and I think it goes back to Julianne's points regarding the almost special status that she would apply to the Swiss events sector, or certainly to the Swiss Tech Centre, and then your comment about your ability to sweep up some of the smaller operators who may well struggle, to survive the pandemic. That really resonates on a global level when you look at some of the very large event operators. The comfort for the banking sector, for the stock market in those stocks, is that their ability to buy up physical assets, be they theatres, conference centres, as well as the properties that reside within those or form within those, has given that bounce back ability, for want of a better expression. At the other end of the events spectrum, the tourism sector, anecdotally, many hoteliers, not just anecdotally, but officially, many hotel groups are reporting strong bookings from March onwards, which have clearly been boosted by immunisation plans and vaccination programs. But within the leisure sector, they're not just reporting higher bookings, they're also reporting higher bookings and a higher spend per person with each of those bookings, as if the world is seeking to treat itself and say, well, not only are we going on vacation, but we're also going to ensure that in our 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of vacation, we indulge ourselves almost as compensation for the lack of movement in 2020. Within the events sector, there's often talk, and we'll come back to the discussion around digitization and virtual events and how that will impact respective businesses. But the word innovation is used a lot. As an events operator, what type of innovations do you see? Do you see a return to the idea, the expression "the new normal" is there, but is it the same types of events, or do you see your events evolving? This really is to the entire panel. But Nick, if you can see how your events or scope of events, outline how your scope of events, scope of territories might evolve as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think 100%. It's not going to go back to what it was. There's no chance of that. So we definitely need to evolve, and you can lead that through innovation, or you can follow that through listening to your customers per se. Like I said, we're lucky in that we're a relatively small organisation, small style events. We can put events on almost at the drop of a hat. So we've been able to adapt pretty quickly. And the virtual world that I mentioned, that we've generated revenue just by running events where everybody's locked in their homes and they can do stuff at home. We're going to continue with that. The trend of fitness, COVID is going to make people want to be far fitter, no matter what. No matter what happens, everybody's going to realise that the fitter and healthier you are. So we're going to continue with the virtual world, even when the real world's getting back to normality. We'll have our normal real events, our program of events, but we will continue with the virtual events as well. And we see those things intermingling. You can link them to each other. do 5 virtual events and you get your free ticket to the real event. Train in these events and you qualify for the final of the real event. This is all within participation. So, that's what we're doing already. And, the way that the world is moving at the moment, this meeting would not have been possible just a few short years ago. The way the world evolves through social media, through technology, through the advances that are made. Everybody's got one of these on their wrist nowadays, telling you how healthy you are, etc. We certainly see the health and fitness industry, not necessarily the events industry, but there's health and fitness, therefore events, is something we're going to innovate into, link that to our fitness events, because obviously events are a key part of in health and well-being. But expand our operation into the ways that the only thing that we limit ourselves in to do is to do with sports. We love the power of sports, so we're just going to stay within that. But innovate within that and work with. We've got a partnership now growing with one of the brands that people wear on their watches off the back of COVID, and because of the way our business works and the way their business works. Previously, it had been a very, very loose partnership, and now it's going to be a really strong partnership, and it's for each business owner to assess how they can find those new opportunities, and there will be huge opportunities for sure.
Yeah. Nick, thanks for that positive outlook. It's good to see that the business has prospered through COVID and will continue to do so. The digital, virtual, there's a breadth to the definitions within that. Simona, you are the panel expert on esports, and I wondered how you believe this segment of the event industry might grow. Just the mere concept of esports, it's a scientific evolution involvement, and it ties in, it brings in part the business to business facilities together with entertainment facilities, and how do you see this evolving or benefiting from what we've experienced in 2020 to date?
Thank you, by the way, thank you for calling me an expert. I'm not an expert at all, but I'm fascinated about the business models around the esports, because first of all, when we talk about sports from the sports institutions point of view, the biggest problem is the governance. The governance is, when we talk about esports, is who's leading what. Because we have the publisher, they invest a huge amount of money to develop an esport. First of all, when we talk about esports, we talk about the video games. So just like FIFA. So it's not just esports, all that we call the esports, all the video games. So we have a publisher that put together a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of money to develop something that's going to generate a huge, if it works, a huge profit. So that's a key point. And when we go into and we try to translate these esports into the sports world, the traditional sports. So it's a little bit difficult to understand who's leading that. So who's the owner or who's the governing body? There is a kind of querelle going on forever now with the different associations that they call themselves the governing body of the esports. And so far, the IOC never really put an halt on this conversation, because it's technically the IOC that can say you are the governing body, you are not the governing body. So it's a huge kind of discussion. However, I think the good news is that some of the traditional sports managed to integrate part of the virtual activities. For example, rowing is a very good example. So they're trying to develop a competition in which they combine the physical activities together with the virtual activities. UCI, so the cycling, they are doing something similar. Because there are sports that are more related to, they're easier in a way to kind of to transfer from the real world to the, say, sort of a virtual world. Some others are much more difficult. Think about skateboarding, for example. If you don't really have a skate park, if you don't have the same skate park with same conditions to all the competitors, all the skaters, how can you really judge them? So it's no longer a matter of I run first, you run second. So it's kind of complicated. But when we go into the esports themselves, so if you go in a bit wide, we approach them in a kind of a bit wider way. It's interesting to see how the entertainment is mixing up with the esports, with the video games. Think about, I think it's a very good example, Travis Scott. At the beginning of this year, he did for the first time a concert inside a platform that is called, inside of an esports called Fortnite. So Fortnite is what we call, technically we call them battle royale. So you go in, you shoot, you have to kill all the other competitors and you win. That's the kind of sports that you have to play. Not to splatter, you don't see blood, you don't see any kind of stuff, but you go straight, you kill all the others, and if you win, you get your 5 million prize. So last year, this guy, 16 years old, in a solo competition, so was himself against all the others, he got 5 million prize money. Just to give you a sense of what happened. What Fortnite did, next level, is to decide to suspend, to freeze all the shooting, and to create a section on inside the platform in which you could join and listen to Travis Scott concert. And that was exclusive, and which is like people that were not there to battle each other, to win anything, just to enjoy 12 minutes, 40 minutes of concert by this guy. And then, by the way, the report that Forbes put together came out last week. So they estimate for the Travis Scott is a rapper. I don't really call them a rapper. I mean, it's a singer. Let's call it a singer. Not a rapper, it's a singer. Out of this package, he got $20 million profit out of this project that they put together. It was a combination. Nike gave him the shoes, and then the shoes suddenly they became a launch. So Nike put together a launch of the shoes, those specific shoes, the Air Jordan shoes, into the market. At the same time, Fortnite, you could buy some skins inside. So it's this business model that was fascinating me, because it's a way to integrate different things in the same platform. So I think that gives us a very good opportunity to be a little bit more creative on thinking how we can really integrate traditional sports, events, entertaining, all together in a way that was impossible to think like probably 2 or 3 years ago. As Nick was saying, so probably 3 years ago, we couldn't really kind of join a conference like this one. There are some stakeholders that are really pushing hard in order to find new ways to. And then I give you just one last comment on Twitch. You probably know Twitch. Twitch is a platform. It's a website. It's very simple as that. It was born a few years ago, and basically you can find on Twitch people that are competing, so different esports competition. And then it's interesting to see, you join there, blah, blah. However, if you go and check the data, you realize that 11% of the people that are on Twitch, they're not there to play games, they're there to chat. So they're using a platform that was born as an esport platform, just chatting. And then, just to give you another figure, when we talk about how many hours the people are spending on Twitch, we are talking about 1.5 billion hours on Twitch per month.
Simone, can I just cut in there? We have 2 minutes left on the program. They are fantastic examples of the innovation and really the diversification that has taken place during this period of time. People are communicating and conversing, through alternative platforms. The events industry really is seeking for a quick return to the physical. And if I can just very quickly ask Julianne, who is very much at the physical end of the spectrum. You know, she's blending the physical with the digital, and really ask if there are, on a global perspective, you know, any specific innovations, you know, programs and incentives that you will employ or others are talking about to kickstart the industry. You know, there are some segments of the industry which will recover quicker than others. In tourism, that recovery has been at the high end. It's been at the super wealthy end. You know, in the global events industry, where do you see the recovery coming quickest?
That's the crystal ball moment, Abby. You know, I wish I had one of those. To be quite honest, like everyone around the table. You know, in terms of specific innovations, I mean, look, we're all, I think, agreed. There's broad alignment that, you know, the digital hybrid world is with us to stay. That we will, however, move to physical meeting again, and people are confident in the ability to do that. So I think that, you know, the big learning is that we have had to move the clock very quickly in getting the ability to run the technology side much quicker than what would have happened in the normal world. We would have just plodded along at our normal course, I believe. And it really has taken something like this to shake us up and say, look, we have to be more creative and innovative with technology, because that's the only way we can maintain this ability to meet. So while we will get back together again at some point, clearly the digital hybrid world is with us to stay, and that pretty much has broad alignment from across all of my colleagues. I mean, the plus side for event organizers is, you know, you increase your reach that way. You know, you're able to bring in many more people into your event, those who physically can't be there. So it's a bit like TV to some extent, but we're going to give you the added advantage of being able to participate in one way or another. And that's where the creativity comes into, is, you know, how do you offer those opportunities for people to participate in an event that is physical, but also give them that opportunity online.
Julianne and the rest of the panel, thank you very much for participating this morning. I think that the recovery of confidence and trust will be there, you know, at some point in 2021, and hopefully, you know, the events industry, you know, will recover, you know, in a varied way moving forward. Thank you very much for participating today, and I'll hand back to the guys at Josoor. Thank you for all of the attendees as well.